what I'll be presenting today is some of the relevant information of the happening of something cataclysmic in the very near future. So, while I was doing my research, I started connecting pieces together, what seems to me like a government cover-up. There are many arguments about global warming, which I'm going to start with. Okay, as you may know, in 2002, Al Gore gave a speech in front of the public saying that the Earth was going through an unprecedented warming phase right now. Well, there are many arguments against that seem to be hidden from the public eye. Yes, you can see right here, there is an increase of CO2, but it becomes arbitrary once you get through all of it. So they said that this is a greenhouse effect from the trapped CO2 in our atmosphere trapping the infrared radiation, but they often compare it to Venus's atmosphere, where 95%, 96.5% is carbon dioxide, whereas our atmosphere comprises of 0.03%. Now, if you take the human additions, you get a total of 0.001% addition to that number. So if you take all the greenhouse gases together, it's often left out that 95% of greenhouse gases is water vapor. Now, the reason for this deemed as irrelevant is because there's a certain accumulation level where you get precipitation. Well, the buoyancy, as it's called, increases with temperature change. So we're going to keep that in mind, and I'll connect that later. But you can see here the temperature variations in between seasons and other cycles, and often they have an accumulation built on CO2 with a best fit line. Best fit lines do not show the variations in between these cycles of CO2, and if you put these together of both variations, you can see the lag in the data between CO2 and temperature change, and it suggests that CO2 precedes temperature change, not the other way around. It's a product of temperature change. Now, where would it be coming from? You could see all the sources of this CO2, and 50 times the amount of CO2 is in ocean. 50 times the amount in the atmosphere is in ocean, thousands of times in marine sediments. Now, the solubility of CO2 decreases with an increase of temperature. So you would get the outgassing of the CO2 from the ocean water once the temperature increases. So the solar cycles account for small variations in between seasons, and these are 11-year cycles, and they closely match up with the increase and decrease of this graph. Every so often, or every 11 years, the magnetic fields on the sun flip, and which sends out a shock wave of radiation. Now, I'm just going to note, in 2012, scientists have already confirmed the possibility of a global blackout from a record high storm that could take place in 2012. But if this were to happen, it would be a blessing compared to what could happen. Now, there are a close connection between sunspot cycles and the temperature increase. You can see here that sunspot cycles increased around 1755, the start of this warming. Now, scientists say our magnetic fields are weakening. Now, if our magnetic fields are weakening, we can assume more solar radiation is penetrating the atmosphere, thus increasing the buoyancy level of water vapor that traps in the heat. Now, the question is, what is making this field weaken? I'll go back to that later, but just to point out, it was warmer 1,000 years ago than today. And you start to see the bigger picture here that they don't show to the public. And 400,000 years in the past through ice core data, we can see that there's an obvious pattern right here. Now, in between these cycles are ice ages, in between the warming cycles, and the warming periods generally last in between 20 and 25,000 years. we're at the peak of this cycle right now. You can see on the right side. And at each one of these peaks, something cataclysmic has to happen in order to reset this cycle. Now, what would this cataclysmic event possibly be? Pole shift. In the early 20th century, it was hypothesized that the Earth has shifted before in the past. Now, it was endorsed by Albert Einstein, and it suggests that it shifts in a matter of hours, 20 to 40 degrees. And we have evidence for this through sediment records that show that mountains have risen and fallen thousands of feet in a matter of hours. Now, the momentum of the lava underneath from the disrupted crust would cause this buckling of the crust and cause it to create this mountain and sinking of land. Now, the ocean water would continue over and flood every coastline from tsunamis that would follow. Now, major volcanic activity would take place because of the disruption and would block out the sun and restart the cycle. Now, another example of archaeological find is frozen mammoths found in Siberia with tropical food in their mouths. You can see the position he's frozen in. Now, there's another type of pole shift, which is magnetic. Every so often, the magnetic fields change polarity. The spinning core inside of our Earth creates this magnetic fields. You can see the reversal. This is what it would look like, our poles, during this reversal. Our poles are moving now. Now, a news article earlier this year in February 2011, said that they had to reorient all the plane coordinates because they no longer matched up with the compasses. And you can see here from this diagram that the poles have started to move at an exponential rate since the early 20th century, the starting of this exponential warming. So what is this force that would be causing this? In the early 20th century, it was also mathematically predicted because of the perturbations in Neptune and Pluto's orbit that there had to be this external force beyond these orbits. Now, it was predicted to be 5 times the mass of Jupiter. It hasn't been mentioned since, except for a 1981 newspaper states that they in fact found this planet X and later claimed it was a mistake. Now, it's inconceivable to me how they can make a mistake like that. You have to question these things. Now, last year, a Princeton University study finds that we are possibly a binary star system, where one body, large body, rotates or orbits around the sun in a highly elliptical orbit, much like a comet. Now, this would extend below the sun, so we wouldn't be able to see it. It would be out of our ecliptic view, or our view, until it eclipses the sun. Now, if you can imagine Earth as a magnet, and this other body has a magnetic field, you get repulsion or attraction, which would cause the movement of these poles. Now, the counter direction of its orbit would cause the core to slow down, which would cause it to weaken, and once it passes by, it would spin it in the opposite direction, causing the reversal of the polarity. Now, this plays an important evolutionary role, which hasn't been explained by scientists today. Now, this is called punctuated evolution, where major evolutionary jumps take place in a short period of time. Now, since we know that excess solar radiation penetrates our poles during these periods, we get genetic mutations once the poles go down. Now, the surviving 10% of the population would pass on these mutations at the time of this cataclysmic event, and these mutations with a chance of benefiting would follow on as natural selection, or adaptation. So likely, if this was a binary star system, it would most likely be a moon orbiting around this object that would have crashed into us 4.5 billion years ago, created the possibility to have land and ocean at the same time. Well, it would be reciprocal to this planet too, just to keep in mind. So I'm just going to go over like one ancient story about this event that occurs, that often take as folklore or stories. So the Hopi Indians in ancient times believed the earth was created and destroyed 4 times in the past, and they believed the 5th time would be the worst. Now, they told a story of 2 Kachina brothers, and the blue Kachina and the red Kachina. Now, the blue Kachina would come before the red Kachina to warn those who are in touch with nature that the evil red Kachina would arrive shortly and come destroy the earth once again. They mentioned there would be 3 shakings before destruction. Now, the Sumerian scriptures, found in 2006,